There are distinct sounds of passing engines and construction work. That's in the far distance. I'm sat at a cold white stone bench beneath sets of balconies, and there is hardly anyone to be seen. I can catch sudden glimpses of people as they walk between the great white pillars, and it almost seems as if they are hiding. Quite daunting, really. It's almost as if I should not be here, which in many ways I shouldn't. This is residential after all. The floor is made of red bricks which have been barely laid to tessellate. Not quite Cheshire bricks. These are far more brittle. The flooring bricks are fractured by a particularly prominent moss, that which I can track this daily sunlight gradually becomes darker and danker towards the parasol of the concrete white walls. A cat's tail just glided behind the white flower bed. Seen again fighting with the dying, nearly dead bush. It sounds in pain. Now I am struggling to see how a bare bush could hurt it. The cat is hitting something. I was wrong, it's tussling with another cat, a very vibrant ginger tabby. Those bushes, out of all 9 of them, in their own assigned banks, only 3 are alive, each of which is separated from one another. Almost like a fateful message as the undead bushes taunt the living. I still see very few residents and fewer sounds, though the variously layered and labyrinth-like walkways allow conversation to travel across the complex, along with footsteps. There is an undesirable level of anxiety that is building, though this is not by one's willful decision to remain in silence. The very fact that I have made this decision has inhibited the effects that I made note of yesterday during my sentence. It is almost as if these are echoes of previous experiences and conversations, while more cats scamper and scout the estate, making this a true concrete jungle. I am beginning to notice more and more the residual banalities that have been left behind, presumably by those who live on this estate. Had this been an everyday passing and not an artist's residency, I don't believe that I would find such so emotive and rich. The graffiti tags spread around the entirety of this estate repetitively seem to be incredibly ambiguous. I simply cannot trace such back to any particular time, and I now question when these were sprayed and by what characters. They scream past generations, though that is purely conjecture. Mushu is the most noticeable, though I'm now uncertain as to whether the greater frequency of their tags makes them dominant of the estate, or it acts as a sort of inflation, and they are now merely a worthless novelty. I'm sure that the residents are sick of the sight of them as they walk to work and come back. I know I would be, but perhaps I'm just not with the times. I need to focus outwards and stop focusing on the inner self. I'm struggling to find a blind spot from the CCTV cameras. Not that I'm trying to hide or anything, but I'm starting to feel like I'm in a nature program for the enjoyment of others. And I feel endangered, because I've already spotted wildlife, I've seen life and death. And now I'm being watched by others, as if I'm an unwelcome nomad. The levels to these buildings is most intriguing. I see a stepped array of heights, beginning with the pots, overshadowed by the short wall, then the fences, the garages, 3 heights of balconies, the roof, and the flat block behind such. This truly puts emphasis on the maze-like quality of this place. I had anticipated previously that I may get lost here, and that was during my sentence. Though to this point I have not moved on, and I'm quite afraid to do so. Behind me, beneath the balconies and flats, I see 2 spills of vomit on the paving slabs. The one is rather dry, while the other is wet. This residue of an individual's sickly journey can be tracked, the wet being closer to the door. They were coming home. Drunk, perhaps. Sat in the enclosed court in which the residents can play football or basketball, I find myself to be intruding more so, despite there still being no one inside. The enclosed cage only heightens this sense of intrusion, and what's more, I seem to be disturbing the echoes of those who have enjoyed this space, the young children bullied by older teens, and dope smokers, as made evident by the discarded roaches on the green asphalt. Strangely, this recreational area has had all life and colour sucked from it. It's a useless shell until it is played with. Even if only used by one person, it's still quite tragic. Now looking back upon everything that I saw, thought, wrote, or drew, or felt, I can't help but find that while a lot of my work or writing comes across as quite tenebrous, I found the estate as a whole to be quite dystopian. It was as if it was post-apocalyptic in many ways, or that it was a vision of such. When referring to the bushes, along with plenty of other things, for example, the sound of footsteps or conversation echoing throughout the pillars and the walkways, there's an undeniable series of omens that appear to be present. My focus was on that of the residual aspects. However, it was overshadowed. I suppose I couldn't really control how I felt or how I was to respond to this. And I'd considered that it was undeniable that there were a great number of various residual pieces of nothingness and banalities. For example, the vomit or the flower beds that were littered with all sorts of various things, or the suitcase thrown over a balcony. I wanted to know what was in there, but I suppose that was also a mirroring of every certain aspect of this complex. And by the very fact that I couldn't know these people, I couldn't know them any further. They were all closed doors. They were never to be seen. I could only ever see their legs go by, but go past the pillars or past the walkways, never to be seen again. I would never see their faces. It was completely anonymous, and that's what I find to be quite daunting and, as I said, dystopian, by the very fact that you can't see their faces because they don't want to be seen. It's as if they're hiding from something, or they're recuperating from something that's already happened, and you shouldn't be there because you're a threat. I understand, of course, that most of the people that were living in these apartments had gone to work. However, it was still as if there was still a presence there, however minor, that didn't want to make itself known. And the whole experience, or the whole physical experience, just screamed with history that was anonymous. I could have digged deeper, I suppose. Could have asked questions to the people that lived there, but unfortunately there was no one there to be seen. For example, the tags sprayed on the walls. Many of them were. I saw many of the same tags across the entire set of buildings, but I already gave my opinion on those. I regret not having spent more time there, but I suppose if I had waited any longer, that would be when people would have started to come home, and kids coming home from school and people coming home from work. When I got there, the only people really there was the groundskeeper and the postman. Had I stayed and allowed and observed the people coming home, the experience would have been completely different, I feel, and it would have turned down the whole idea of why I'd chosen that place in the first instance. It was by the very fact that it was completely quiet during the silent walk, and it was almost alien to me, having spent the past several months in a city that just doesn't ever seem to sleep, but this estate was nocturnal, really, I suppose. Or perhaps they just hibernate in the evening. I suppose it depends on the perspective. I'm rambling. There were several ways in which I could actually characterise the estate and the whole experience as a whole. Like I said, it could be considered as a dystopia, almost Orwellian. Maybe the people who lived there were actually inside, hiding, but they were being watched by the several CCTV cameras, from which, like I said, I could not find a blind spot from. Along with the patrol of the gardener. Or it could also be considered as a semi-natural habitat. It looked as if wildlife was taking over, not wildlife, nature. As moss started to crawl out between the gaps of the brickwork on the floor. Ivy was growing on the white walls. That's not the white. That's quite complimentary, really. It was grey. Cats prowled the area, fighting with each other. It was almost as if this whole experience could be characterised as the survival of the fittest, and this estate hadn't evolved